Very good evening to you, and thank you so much for listening to Radio 1 FM 90. Welcome to this edition of Spectrum, coming to you live right now. And today we'll be looking at a very important subject, which is democracy in the EAC region. And we know elections are taking place in different places in this region. Tanzania had an election yesterday, and might have heard in our news there, it was marked by, fracas, and some people are expressing concern over the manner in which the incumbent, that's the President Samia Suluhu Hassan, has acted. And although there are about 9 presidential candidates, the talk is about those that are incarcerated, the main opposition political party, Chadema leaders, who have not been able to take part in this election. In Uganda, we know the campaigns are also going on peacefully in some instances, but we've started seeing some issues coming up. There was, that entry into the hotel of the NUB party president, Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu, the other day. Police says they were carrying out investigations. The incident happened at night at around 9 p.m. and it lasted to around 12 midnight when the police left. Apparently they're investigating some members of the NUP who were involved in theft and a number of other issues. Actually, 10 of them were arraigned in court today for charges, which an issue that we'll also be looking into. Kenya will be conducting elections next year, and there are issues also there about democratization and so forth. So we want to discuss and see the level of democratization in this region, to see what we need to do as a region to ensure that we actually sustain the gains that have been made in terms of democracy, but also improve where we are not doing well. 2 guests today. Let me introduce the one who is already here in the studio, Mr. Joseph Ochieno. He's a UPC member and a pundit on governance and development matters. He's a Pan-Africanist. Welcome to Spectrum, Mr. Ochieno.
Thanks for having me, and I appreciate being the first one onto your studio, especially considering the fact that I always keep time, just like you always keep time. I'm always saddened when I am alone. It feels very lonely with you. I don't know where your other guests are, but it's always a pleasure to be here. Well,
our second guest is the Honorable James Kakoza. He's a Ugandan representative to the East African Legislative Assembly. He comes from the NRM party. He's caught up. He's on the way. He will be joining us shortly. Be fair. You've also come late.
I never came late.
In the past, Mr. Ochieno.
I've never been late here. I've never been late on your program.
All right, but that's not the issue of discussion today. Describe to us the level of democratization in the East African community before we start breaking down the issues and looking at the different partner states that are in this regional bloc.
I thank you for this topic, and I thank you once again for inviting me. In the course of the day, I woke up to a program on constitutionalism and rule of law, human rights, democracy, elections, and other things. I will not advertise that program. Later, I have been involved with and in a program involving young people. I don't know whether you'll allow me to mention the fact that it is something organized with a civil society organization for university students across the country, organized by Center for Constitutional Governance. And I came straight from there. In fact, I cut short my own panel, for which I thought it was important that I join you, because we're going to continue with that. But the reason I refer to that is because seeing the debates from young people today, I get excited considering where we're coming from as part of the student engagement, the student debate, and then relative to my own times of debates. And yet, that said, I get very concerned by the limitations in terms of context by contemporary young people at university level education in terms of appreciation of the issues, political issues, human rights issues, development issues, and indeed, in any case, therefore, critically, fundamentally, human rights issues. And so, considering that we are talking about Gen Z in Kenya, Gen Z in TZ, we've rarely talked about Gen Z in Uganda, and considering the fact that I am lucky enough to have experienced an early part of East Africa when I was born, and the contemporary East Africa, I find a net void when it comes to not only appreciation of issues, political issues that is, but saddened that I don't know whether there is any democracy today in East Africa that you can write home about, except the nearest is possibly Kenya. Tanzania is a big disappointment to me. CCM, Chama cha Mapinduzi, is a sister party to the Uganda People's Congress, and I talk about it with a heavy heart. CCM, as a political party, and indeed as a governing political party, is officially a friend of Ugandans across the political divide, because if you consider the history, the fact that Tanzania, which has been led by CCM since independence, has always been supportive of Uganda generally politically, and particularly has hosted Ugandan leaders, nearly most of them, if you consider Museveni, Obote and others. But the CCM that I thought it was then, the CCM of President Silulu up to very recently, taking over from Mr. Magufuli, is seemingly not the CCM Tanzania that I'm seeing in the last few weeks to the last few months, and perhaps to the last few years, including one which sort of subjected my good friend and your fourth estate friend who went to TZ, Agatha Athaire. That is not the CCM TZ that I thought it would be. I wrote, I used to write for the New African magazine, and I had a column called Outside, Inside, Out of Africa. And I was completely convinced that as President Kikwete was leaving office, he was going to take over, informally or otherwise, as the new leader of Africa outside State House, almost like I expected Thabo Mbeki to do so while in State House. So to see a Tanzania going through an election in 2026 in which the official opposition leader is in jail, in which the next opposition political party, Wazalendo, is not participating, at least in the mainland Tanzania, I find it very sad. Like we've questioned here in Uganda, you wonder, I have been in Tanzania the other year. If you look at the composition of politics and polity and political parties and the strength of Chadema and others, what is it that Chadema has that is so threatening to the democratic process, to the political process, that if their leader was allowed to campaign freely and openly, would become a threat to national security of Tanzania? In any case, if I was to offer advice and strategy, and I'm still available, what CCM has done in recent years, particularly if you consider infrastructure, some of the injections in terms of the social services, but side by side with the social programs, progressive left social programs of a traditional leftist political party and political party in government like CCM and UPC would do, they've had a massive opening of space for private sector operations. And so the Tanzania of as recent as 18 months ago was a Tanzania that, in my opinion, I was very much envious of, both economically and therefore possibly politically. And so if CCM were to basically use policy achievements, primarily recent times, if you look at the investment assets in rail networks, roads, and others, the development in terms of the mineral sector and others, there's no reason why CCM would not reasonably win the elections. But also, on the other hand, what is it in Africa? I know we are discussing this sub-region, that a governing political party or an incumbent party or government feels it's a matter of life and death, that they risk, the mere risk or possibility that they might lose an election is a matter of life and death. In any case, the foundation that CCM have had, I don't see it as a major thing that even if they had a shock election defeat, after all, you do these things and after 5 years you can always make a comeback. So that is TZ. In Uganda, of course, we've gone through our electoral process. I am glad that thus far, it is a couple of weeks, we've not had people's legs being broken. We've not had, I've not had personally, of a specific, possibly casualties in terms of deaths directly related to an election as violence, relative at least particularly to 2021, which was unacceptable. Thus far, there have been limitations, and particularly NUP has complained. I think Nandala Mafabi, my good OB, has also complained, has one or two incidents. I don't know about other. So there's not been a big report of issues impeding candidates to campaign. So thus far, I think, so far, so good. If you ask me, and I know we're going to be dealing with that, in what big issues the candidates and political parties are putting on the table, that's a different topic. But thus far, not particularly bad. But finally, if you then link, you realize I'm confining myself to the 3 East African countries, but we can come back to the rest. Kenya. Kenya must be smiling to the bank, maybe as the leader here, considering what he did last week with the state funeral for Raila Odinga that brought together the whole country, all the various political classes. I was privileged to have been in Bondo to see the final resting of this major figure of East Africa. In fact, Raila will be reviewed and revered more, possibly, the longer he takes after his death than it is today. And of course, also a couple of days ago, unfortunately, I don't think many people got to know enough. There was a memorial service for him at All Saints Cathedral here in Kampala, where Governor Anyang' Nyong'o accompanied his daughter Winnie and a delegation from Kenya to come and celebrate the lives of Raila Odinga. Why I'm saying that is, one, it's tribute to him, which can come back to it, but two, particularly that this man contributed to a compulsion in politics in Kenya, which, as East Africa, perhaps we can take, that it is possible to be a good winner, but it's also possible to be a good loser. But it's also possible that you can lose and choose a reason beyond yourself, beyond your political party, and one that brings country first. Of course, that is slightly harder in Uganda, where the establishment seem to be rather too monolithic. But maybe it's a lesson for all of us. But finally then, if we see some of those the flames taking place in Tanzania, they may be isolated, including Dar es Salaam. It's something that you'd least expect a few days ago and a few weeks ago. And so therefore, the whole of this region ought to know that there is nothing impossible when you stretch people to the extremes.
All right, Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90. A topic of discussion today, we are looking at democracy in the East African community. A number of events actually taking place, elections. We have campaigns here in Tanzania. They've just had an election. You've had Mr. Joseph Ochieno from the Uganda People's Congress talking about the situation in Kenya. We know about Burundi, Rwanda, and South Sudan, where they're supposed to have an election to solve their impasse. That has not happened. But let me introduce my second guest, the Honorable James Kakoza, Uganda's representative to the East African Legislative Assembly. He comes from the ruling NRM party. Good evening, Honorable, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Kenneth. I'm sorry I've come late a bit.
You were concerned. We thought you had been kidnapped.
Probably.
No, how?
Probably those are the gains that you're protecting, Honorable Kakoza.
Yeah, listen.
Very many vehicles, and
I'm happy I was not here for some time, and then I'm happy to call me.
Thank you so much.
Some comments and
all right. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, we are discussing the level of democratization in the East African community, and this has been triggered off by the election that we have had in Tanzania. Of course, you know what has happened there, the chaos that has followed that particular process. And people are surprised how the president has reacted. So many had welcomed her thinking she was a Democrat. She had negotiations with the opposition, brought them closer, only to incarcerate them, put them in jail.
Really, what has happened in Tanzania, my colleagues, some colleagues of mine, are still in Arusha, because we had committees, we had last week plenary, and we left him there. But it's a shock. We didn't expect what happened in Tanzania. Some of us who have been there for some time, who took a keen interest in Tanzanian politics. But it's very unfortunate, because I think time memorial since Nyerere's time, they have never got such a disturbance. And it is quite a shock. It's very unfortunate. It's not desirable within the region, because we thought that these are countries which you could do carefully understand them, because they have been stable for quite a number of years. And when it happened, nobody could believe, because among the East Africans, so that the people have maintained peace. Chama cha Mapinduzi have been there for quite a long time. I think they have never faced such an environment.
Not since about 1964, therefore, thereabout, which was in any case possible almost more military than otherwise, yes.
Yeah. So it was, this time around it has taken a different trend. I think now politics is changing. You know, every environment brings in a new system, brings in a new environment, brings in sort of things like, because when you look at Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi, the politics you see becoming so different from the old times. It could be Uganda. Uganda has faced many challenges, because when you look at the history, we are the people who have got so many presidents coming in different styles. I think this is the only time when a president has stayed for almost 39 to 40 years. But in the past old days, you know, they could
be shot out.
It could be shot out. Tanzania has been stable for quite a long time. Kenya, see what, when Ruto came in, Kibaki came in, and you know, the situation is changing now.
There have been transitions there.
Yeah, transition there. So I think we should accept that the way how we need to handle politics in our countries, we need to be very careful.
What do you think went wrong in Tanzania, Honorable Kakoza? You work from there. You've been probably listening into what has been going on.
There have been quiet, internal, historical issues. And the difference with Tanzania, them Tanzania kwanza.
Country first.
Country first. They've been having internal conflicts, but they don't give a chance to let them out, the public to know. Not like in Uganda, not like in Kenya. Their system, it has been cudgeled in a way that what happens in Kenya, Tanzania, is a small sort of operation, and nobody can let it go out. They solve the internal mechanism, but they have been having that conflict internally. Not until the recent times. Because when you read the history of Tanzania, when you read the Sokoines, when you read the others, you find they've been having them. But the way how they have been suppressing them, I think now it's becoming open. They never allowed it in the past years. But now it's becoming so open, because in Tanzania they have a system that not Kenneth Kakoza and my brother here can talk about politics. It's a class thing. It's a class thing. You just go vote mwenyekiti. That's the end of the story. You go back to business. But in Uganda here, it's totally different. You talk politics from the time of elections to another time of election, but Tanzania could not happen like that. It was built in a way that free, loud talk
is not there.
And which is not good, because democracy, once you agree to be open, there must be transparency, there must be accountability, but the moment you suppress that, not others to know, when it comes with violence. It's a bust.
All right. Mr. Cheno.
And this, I think, that's what has happened.
All right. Mr. Cheno, we had this situation with UPC here, those founding political parties. We had that situation with KANU in Kenya. Could CCM be also on the verge of losing it all? Those historical political parties beginning to crumble, to give way to new political bodies.
But which situation can you relate to CCM? But I get your context.
CCM has been in charge, like Onobaka Koza tells you.
No,
KANU was similarly in charge. UPC was also in charge. But now we are seeing sort of people revolting.
I think, but the UPC situation was not that. The UPC one situation was something that is rarely talked about. It's very important. Is something that was driven by external forces because of our economic and policies and foreign policies and regional policies. That is something that is rarely talked about. The UPC too, a combination of both foreign forces and internal conflicts. That's true. You can't map that onto some of the things that James is talking about as far as TZ is concerned.
All right, let's look at TZ situation.
Yes, but where you are right to link it up is that, yes, this is a founding independence political party. Now, if you see comparative situations in Botswana, long-serving political parties, although not necessarily liberationists in that sense, and then you see what's happened, the pressures now are beginning to push for our colleagues ANC, our colleagues even in SWAPO, in Namibia. You could argue that those are sort of related. But to bring you back to wherever we are at the moment, where that is important, James, in 1975, over lunch in Tanzania, in Dar es Salaam actually, Msasani, Dr. Bote told Julius Nyerere, over lunch where Mama Mira was, and both first ladies were there, that look, it is good for us to hand over, to retire when we are still popular. I think I've ever told you program that. And so the idea was these guys were generally talking democracy, whatever their shortcomings at the time were, and they were talking about the future, whatever the conflicting political challenges they're facing both domestically and regionally. Obote came back but was not able to have the privilege to hand over voluntarily. Nyerere later handed over under pressure, but you could give credit that he actually went ahead and did that.
Was it under pressure? Was it under pressure?
Well, of course, the world was changing, and that's very important. There's little credit to Nyerere. By the time Nyerere was opening up, the globe was such that if he didn't, he was going to be pushed. The kind of scare that James suggests Tanzania has avoided, the kind of pressures that you saw from Zimbabwe, Kenya, and other places, they were going to be pushed because there was a new culture for this push for pluralism, whatever the sources. I have actually argued that I still defend Robert Mugabe today, ironically, because the push for pluralism, the push against Robert Mugabe was an ideological push, it was a colonial push. MDC, I know, we've got conflicting relationships. MDC was fundamentally pushed by imperialist forces against basically an anti-revolutionary or political organization with evidence that I know and that I saw. In TZ, where they may be going wrong is where my other good colleagues and friends in ANC may almost certainly be wanting to get it wrong.
In CCM?
Yes. That's why I told you at the introduction, James, and James will, maybe I don't know whether you listened.
I was listening.
Yes. You've governed for such a long time. You gained a huge amount of political and economic privilege. But you must realize that at some stage, longevity has its own disadvantage. Now, because of the savviness of the changes of situation that James again is referring to, it's incumbent upon the CCM leaders to say, look, we've been here for a very long time. How can we sustain ourselves?
Okay.
That they were lucky enough to openly reform economically, because that net contributes. And by the way, Chadema is a right-wing political party, although they're not talking. I don't think they're playing ideology sufficiently. Simply the change. They could push on market reforms, push on areas where CCM is failing. Unfortunately for them, what CCM was failing 30 years ago is not what CCM is failing on today. Because as I say, CCM has substantially invested in public service, particularly infrastructure, education, I think, and health. I'm not sure about their percentages, but they're doing better than they were doing 30 years ago. And so the opening up also of the Tanzanian market is such that you can say the economy we have today is a transformative economy. But the problem is, if you read globalization and this contents, part of the problem with this marketization thing that NRA failed the trap for. You open up. If you don't open up in a balanced way, you let in a huge amount of the market, and at the same time, the extremes of the left, which is guys' level of unemployment, incapacity to fill the gaps in education, insufficient provisions in terms of health services, and for Tanzania, which is not like privileged Uganda as far as land is concerned, you're not able to cater. If you go to Julius Nyerere's home village area, you'll actually see that, well, these guys need irrigation. So if you're not able to provide for that, you're bound to get this backlash. Now, when the backlash comes, you do not see it as an enmity. You say, we, the people of Tanzania, we have challenges. You create a situation in which you risk losing, and if you lose, you rather lose and prepare for the next time. But it's actually possible that if you make a fair argument, CCM, if it makes a fair argument, it would be a better judgment for CCM than the extremes they've taken recently with opposition.
All right, Spectrum on Radio 1 FM, and we're going to go for a short break. When we return, we'll try to bring it back home here. NRM has also been in power for quite some time, 40 years. Mr. Cheno talks about the problem of longevity, and we have had also some people talking about the Honorable James Kakoza is about to open up a discussion on how NRM can rebrand itself without its current leader. Stay tuned to Radio 1 FM 90. We'll continue after this break. Well, thank you so much for staying with us on Spectrum Live on Radio 1 FM 90. A topic of discussion today, we are looking at the level of democratization in the East African community. This discussion is based on the fact that we have elections in two partner states. One will be coming up next year, that is in Kenya. We had an election in Rwanda the other day. South Sudan is struggling to organize one. In Burundi, well, the situation is the way it is. We are trying to understand what we need to do as a region to sustain the gains made in far as democracy is concerned, but also, improve on our situation. Now, both panelists, Honorable James Kakoza and Mr. Joseph Ocheno, concur that what has happened in Tanzania is a shock. But Mr. Cheno talks about longevity, and I want to come to you, Honorable Kakoza. NRM has been in power for 40 years. And Ocheno suggests that if you stay longer in power, certain things start going left, right, and center and crumbling, surely like we saw with KANU. Now we are seeing the trouble CCM is going through. Are you prepared as the NRM?
I think one of the most important things in longevity is the history of the country. The history of the country determines how you handle politics in that country. Before I answer, I want to comment on something like what my brother has said. Tanzania, the president who is there, CCM has got all the privileges. Even it has got a merit to explain to the public that even if opposition comes, they couldn't break even. Because the way how Tanzania is, how it was before, and the system, the way how they are running their government, it shows that CCM has the capacity to have a control. But then the moment you open up and suppress, it becomes a problem.
Yeah.
So the way to deal with it is just could have opened up and allowed some flexibility. Because even if I allow it, for instance, like now politics, the campaigns are going in Uganda now. Why are they now? There is no much violence like it was before.
People are wondering.
Yeah, the question is, we are making a mistake.
You were making a mistake.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we were making a mistake not to allow people, to allow them talk. Because this is the only country, by the way, that has many people involved in politics. And the moment they get involved, you leave them. You open up. So long as they are not violent. One country which I might not say within the region. Even this campaign, them they tell you, please, Kennedy is going to contest in an area. They bring just only photos. That's the history of their country. But for Uganda now, which has gone through problems, like when we came in, you remember that we started with a single multi-party system. We are stabilizing. In 2015, we agreed that parties should start what? Form, and we go back as it was in 1960s. Then the moment you open up and agree, you make laws, you make what, then the people coming into, you leave them and give them a ground to play. What you need to control is the way they can't go beyond a certain, you can't go beyond your mandate and start doing funny things. But otherwise, when you open up, you can't say, UPC is a party, DP is a party, and then you start saying, don't operate. No. You balance. If these people in a party are not inconveniencing others, you leave them to operate. And that's where NRM gets credit. Any person who wants to contest, you come in free, you start from LC1 up to the president. You are voted for. Every 5 years you come back. The moment you allow that, don't say somebody should not come because he's coming from a different party. You leave that person, you argue. Because for me, it could be fun, a movement which has done and made a change in all this time. You come and say, no, Kennedy, you've started a new party, don't come because you are in opposition. No, we go to the public, we appeal to them, we ask them a mandate, we lay our manifesto, people will judge. And once they understand you that you are not adding anything to in the public domain, they will avoid you, they will look at you and leave you. So this is the way how we should operate in this region, that once you allow democracy to happen, leave it. The only way you control that it cannot damage and inconvenience others who are not interested. And that's why now, when when you make a mistake and you take a SWOT analysis, you must know where your strength is, your weakness is, and your threats were there. The moment security agreed and said, please, we are sitting down, we are saying, you people, presidents who are going to contest, go and tell the public your manifesto, but don't inconvenience others. That's why now, what my brother has said, why there is no much violence.
All right. Mr. Cheno, are we avoiding the Tanzanian situation, looking at what has transpired so far?
I think James has made a very important point that that consoles me, and I hope is right. And for some of the submissions I made before he actually came into the studio was related, that to the extent that thus far, except for the Lira incidents, which we must also discuss, and a few others, and to the extent also, I must say on the record, I was with Justice Biabakama this morning at an event, and I intended to raise it with him, that a particular UPC parliamentary candidate was not nominated because allegedly he arrived at the nomination center at 4:30, and all the other electoral officials were there except the returning officer, and then the returning officer comes at 3 minutes past 5 and says time up and asks these people to close and go. This candidate has made a submission to the Electoral Commission. Simon this morning seems to suggest quite clearly that they'll be looking into this as part of formal complaints. I hope they do so expeditiously. he also suggests that I think the number of complaints up to 40. I don't know what the other circumstances are. Those such things do not really help the processes. But I'm saying away from those, in relative terms, compared to what happened in 2021, we are sort of in a situation in which we just pray that it takes us up to the finishing line come next year. But it is the case, it would appear, that the authorities in Uganda recognized what we were saying earlier and what James was also saying earlier, that you don't need to break people's legs in order to necessarily, quote, win elections. At the moment, it's almost impossible, it's actually impossible for NRA to lose parliamentary majority. So for me, both as a political pundit and as a realist, I would say that in terms of the number of submissions political parties have made in terms of candidates, it's almost it's impossible. NRA will get the majority in parliamentary seats. Now, why don't you then argue that perhaps even if we lost the presidency, for argument's sake, you would still have some semblance of control government. And now, when it comes to the question of the presidency, if you see the mathematics at the moment, obviously it's difficult, early days, to tell. If you look at crowds of Chagulanyi and then you see crowds of Mr. Museveni, and then you see what the other parties are doing quietly, our friends in FDC are saying that for them they do equivalent of door to door. We don't know whatever it is. But must it be a matter of life and death? It must not. And so my understanding from friends in government is that they may have learnt a lesson. And they may have learnt a lesson. Our friends in CCM, and I'm referring to CCM more than Tanzanian government, ought to read this, that if what happened in 2021 were to be allowed to happen, this country would boil into a state in which NRA would almost certainly not be able to contain. So I hope it's lesson learned. And so for the moment, I think there has been some listening. That said. Now, for TZ, again, as I said, is it necessary? Totally not. But that said, though, James suggested, of the 3 traditional East African states, James, by the way, I'm surprised that you don't want me to be a member of your legislative assembly, because I'm a traditional member of the conviction is of that. But I'm a completely believer of the original East African communities, Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania. We concretize, and then after we concretize, then we go through a traditional convergence criteria in which all the other new member states come on the basis of meeting a certain criteria, both in terms of the legislation, the political systems, and possibly even in the economics, rules and regulations here and there. But so for Tanzania, rather for Burundi, elections took place the other day, a few months ago, and I'm told all parliamentary seats were won by the ruling party. This 100% victory can be a very tricky thing. I don't know much of the details, but can be a very tricky thing when it comes to the question of perception. What is it? It must tell you that possibly things are not so good. But of course, James has also hinted that within this region, we have nation states where candidates may not necessarily campaign and shout around like once in a while we do here in the Republic of Uganda. So we know where some of those places are, where perhaps presidential candidates may go ahead and get 95%. And if we take ourselves to Saddam Hussein, when these things hit 90, there's trouble. Milton Obote told me, and by then I hadn't even met him, by the way, sometimes in the 90s, that, when you're with the executive, I was the chairman of the executive bureau of the party in UK, when you're with the executive and, you don't expect that your colleagues in the executive will disagree with you. You're becoming a mini dictator. Meaning, you didn't put it that way. You simply say that, look, you must recognize that even within your executive, discussing maybe a policy on Article 269 of the NRA Constitution at the time, which was at the heart of our debates. One or two of your colleagues might have an opinion. Or tomorrow, there is Independence Day, we should have a demonstration in Trafalgar Square. Someone might say, no, instead of having a demonstration, maybe let's have a public talk. So political leaders ought to recognize that in diversity and politically, we shall have a difference, including the Chinese Communist Party, for which there is only one governing political party. They will go through these processes and make sure that, well, where is the difference? Is he radically so much possibly anti-American, or is he a believer in Trident, or is he one of those people who believe that we should never let go Taiwan? But it is within the same household. How do we tolerate these processes? It is important.
Very quickly, Honorable Kakwaza, before I read out some of the comments that are coming in.
Actually, the politics, the way how it's globally, even in US, where every leader in a position must study the environment. Yeah. Because environment dictates the trend of the day.
And your response.
And your response.
Yeah.
If you don't balance and draw a strategy within that environment can break you. And you lose a lot and the public will lose. So the best way is just you must be accommodative with all divergent views. And you compare what your strategy to deal with it. But you don't suppress it. You leave that discussion to happen. One of which, even if you want to believe it or not, where my president is the person who is very, very, very accommodative and very tolerant and very patient. One of the areas why he has managed all that time, 40 years. Because you can't believe that a president can allow anybody, even from opposition, and works with that person.
All right. Let's get the comments that are coming in from the listener. I'll begin with Albert, who is tuned in from Entebbe. He says, there's a lot happening in Africa at large with regards to how leaders want to cling to power. Cameroon is in flames, Madagascar, Ivory Coast, and now Tanzania. And God knows whether Uganda is heading there. What is the role of the African Union in all this? Is it still a relevant institution? Should the Gen Z revolution be an agent of change and be promoted? We have a comment coming in from Okama Emmanuel, who is listening in from Okono Municipality. He says the EAC needs to prioritize strengthening democratic institutions, promoting transparency and accountability, and fostering a culture of democracy to ensure the region's stability and prosperity. Opposition leaders in the entire region have faced arrest and intimidation. Civic space is being curtailed. There is a need for stronger institutional and mechanisms to ensure transparency and accountability in governance. States under the ruling parties have no regard for their constitutions. East African presidents have taken charge of the state armies for their own benefits, though they happen to be the commanders in chief. Another comment, democracy in East Africa is seen by those in power today as a leadership without any existence of opposition. Leaders think that if it's not only them, then nobody else. Alas, the strong opposition leaders are in prisons while leaders are riding on lies and illusions. It's a tough situation. Then we have another comment coming in from Arthur. Longevity breeds, I am the only one. Come what may, and then you begin suppressing others. Countrymen, open your eyes more. It's a pity that both guests in studio are uniparties. It is not true that the Tanzania incident is a shock. Honorable Kakwaza falsely hangs onto the history in Tanzania, but the Tanzanians of this millennium are different. Just the other day, Deputy Secretary General of the NRM, Rose Namayanja, was boasting that they are a national party just like CCM, who began their perennial stay from independence. As for Cheno, to assert that Obode didn't get the opportunity to hand over truly reflects the UPC conscience. All Mulungushi club members fell short of democracy, yet they still have followers just like the NRM. Well, those are the comments that we're getting from the listeners. I wonder if you want to respond to any.
Just quickly, and it's not defensive at all. The question of Mulungushi Club, that's a very important question. Julius Nyerere, Kenneth Kaunda, and Milton Obote, and together with Oliver Tambo as the frontline guys for the liberation movements in Southern Africa. The focus then was very much about liberation. But interestingly, except for Oliver Tambo, who was not the president of a governing political party, it was only Milton Obote who was a pluralist multi-partist, except in Uganda, people reluctantly don't want to accept that. It is true Nyerere believed in one-party monolithic state. Whatever the case, we can discuss that another time, and so did Kenneth Kaunda, and indeed they banned political parties. But in Uganda's case, we did not ban, and they realized that in 1979, very important, James, you need to get this, during the, and Mr. Museveni will concur, during the Moshi Unity Conference, part of the debate was whether or not we should return to pluralism, and we did. But prior to Moshi, Julius Nyerere went to Milton Obote. This is history for all Ugandans. Went to Obote and said, now that intelligence and our military are telling us we've got capacity to go up to Kampala, Nyerere's, and this is for the record, including my memoirs, Nyerere's view was that they should impose a military government in Kampala that was friendly to Tanzania. And Milton Obote said no. So it's the original idea of bringing Ugandans together to determine the future of Uganda was Milton Obote's. And Obote's conviction was that no, military system in Uganda was no. And he realized we pushed for multipartyism, regardless of what the weaknesses of the post-80s Uganda. We were general pluralists. And that's why, even in the early 80s, when I went to Kenya, you go to Kenya and find Nyayo, Fata Nyayo, one-party system. Uganda was a pluralist system. Granted, NRA guys were fighting us in the bush. It was a system that you can criticize, but at least it was not a monolithic system.
Very quickly, somebody raises a very important issue
Yes,
about the role of the African Union in all this situation that we have of democratization. The other day, I saw the African Union actually congratulating Paul Biya when he was declared the winner at a time when the Cameroonians are actually up in arms, and most likely they will also congratulate Suluhu Hassan. They did the same in Madagascar the other day. What is the role of this institution?
Let me just make a quick response.
Let me tell you. You see, as I said, that each environment dictates the trend. By that time, African Union had a role to play. But look at the dynamics of economics. Now, the countries to survive, they must form blocks. East African Community, COMESA, ECOWAS. You know, when you come together, that the economic factors are forcing some countries to work together, that it cannot be a union, not until you form those blocks that you can survive. Because now, when you look at the strategy of Jomo Kenyatta,
Milton Obote,
Nyerere, what was their pillars, their strategy? They wanted to have a common market.
They actually wanted to have a one country.
Exactly. They wanted the people to interact, movement of free people, strategy, security strategy, prosperity. Those were the key areas, and even Pan-Africanism. So, but how do you form Pan-African without sorting yourself within the region?
That's a challenge. That's a challenge. Yes,
that's a challenge. So the best way you form blocks.
All right.
Like Kennedy forms a block, so African Union now where we are. So all countries are surviving in blocks.
Let's ask the
European Union, because the trend by then, now the situation is the forces which makes you to survive. These are political stability, economic situations, and prosperity for the people, the citizens within the region.
All right, at least from West Africa, we hear ECOWAS issuing statements condemning military coups and things like that.
This is it.
Let's ask you a situation in the East African community. Where is the EAC when matters like this are coming up?
Of course, the most important thing, when they were making a treaty, it had four pillars. It depended on the history. They remain with their sovereignty. Each every country has its own sovereignty. Whereby they say, please, when you need help as a leader of that country, you call us to come in. Otherwise, it's Kennedy when you have your home. And then you say you come to dictate terms in my home. You won't like it. But when you need, like for instance, they're creating some standby security forces which are called to stabilize within the region. But other countries are saying, no, we are a foreign state. For instance, I can give you an example. When Congo, DRC, came in here, the people of the East African community had standby forces. But the loyalty for DRC, it had COMESA. But these people are saying, we are together. Let's sit and agree. What is the problem of these guys in the Goma and those things? Once you internally you don't solve them, they will become a problem to you. All right. And they will not act.
Very quickly.
So, people today, as I've said, that all leaders, they lead people, but they must study the situation and balance so that we have a stability within the country. You cannot be, I can tell you, without fear or favor, you could move from Namanga up to Dar es Salaam. There was only one picture for the president. What about others? which is not happening in Uganda. Uganda, because it learned history, is saying no. Please, we opened up because the situation before it didn't allow us. We got external forces that will go multipartism. Let's go multipartism, but doing it genuinely.
But James, people are saying that at Entebbe Airport is sort of also one picture and one color. But look, fair enough. In relative terms, you're right. No, but I think very quickly on this AU question, James, I think it's a very important question. The caller says the African Union should be the stronger body than regional body
within the African Union.
Within the African Union. And where are they? And that's why I said at the beginning that, look, we need a strong African Union, but we also need strong voices, maybe outside government, big name people that used to be there to simply say, bang the table, like elders, if you like, a pan of elders, to say, no, this cannot happen in DRC, this cannot happen in Kampala, Dar es Salaam, what's going on. We urgently need those eminent persons for this continent. It's no contradiction that we have those ones side by side with the regional blocs. In any case, at the foundation of the Organization for African Unity, one of the reasons why, away from the one government thing, the regional bloc was recognition that it was harder to do the other one, and number two, the challenges facing colonial forces that we had at the time. But really the long-term view was that we would have one united Africa. At the moment, I think the one single voice for Africa is very absent, and regionally here for East Africa, I think as the region with the least voice, official big voice, is East Africa. Unfortunately, Mr. Museveni is the elder statesman in this region. I would rather see his voice slightly louder. Unfortunately, once in a while, he's a little bit too conflicted.
No, he's always patient. He doesn't respond quickly. He's always patient, and it's quite good that really what is important within African Union, there are some people who are believing in that colonialism of the past days. And if they don't come out of it, look at Traore, what he's doing.
All right.
The problem which is disturbing with our neighbors, they are refusing to come out of that colonial mentality.
All right.
So they should come out and know what is the strategy within the region and the bloc you are forming, and you agree to each other for stability, for prosperity of the citizens. These blocks are not for readers.
Thank you so much, gentlemen, and thank you very much, dear listeners, for tuning in and contributing to this discussion. Up next, we have the news in English with Ms. Josephine Dagano. Thereafter, we'll have the Solvent, but do join me tomorrow for 2 hours of analysis of the top events of the week during Spectrum Extra. Until then, have a fabulous night.